Coming up on F'ing Up the Ineffable.
Buff, whatever, healing, whatever it was. But it was a melody that you played that you had to keep going. Now, there was no, I mean, you're a bard, you're playing music, but no, it didn't require any musical ability or anything like that.
Of course not. You'd have much fewer bards.
But the idea was
people
that
would have killed their own fucking bards. Please stop. Jesus Christ. Sounds like you're killing a fucking cat.
Hello, everyone.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Mike.
we're experts in some things, such as IT, which we'll probably never discuss.
We're published authors with over 20 books.
Wait, we are? Which ones did I write?
We're musicians who played on albums and TV.
And developers who have written software used by literally millions of people.
Wait, really? I have?
Over the years, we have had in-depth conversations about everything from theoretical physics
To the nature of consciousness.
to why Marvel is way better than DC.
Is it though?
And we thought maybe you'd like to listen in. Trust us, we're really interesting people. And smart.
And don't forget good looking.
And we're effing up the ineffable.
So this episode, we are going to talk about something that is a lot lighter than most of our other episodes, and that is old school role-playing games and roguelikes. Now,
And role-playing games, you mean computer role-playing
yes,
games, right?
yes, computer, because we will probably talk about pen and paper at some point,
Right.
because we're just that big of geeks that we actually have a lot to say about both those subjects, which is it's amazing that neither one of us are virgins. We actually have children. We can prove it. But in any event, we're going to talk about role-playing games. I don't know about you. I kept mine mostly to the kind of standard, quasi-medieval Lord of the Rings-ish, D&D-ish kind of stuff. I've got a few that don't fit that mold, but most of them that I put in this list do fit that mold.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have both played a lot of different kinds of games over the years. And I know for me, there's a couple of genres that I've always gravitated towards. And role-playing games is definitely one of those. I mean, for the longest time, it felt like that was about all that I played. I found some other loves along the way, but still going back to a really great computer role-playing game for me is just awesome. That sounds so nerdy. It's like, it's awesome. But I mean, it makes you feel and plan and think in just a different way than a lot of other games do.
Totally agree. I do need to, I think, explain roguelike a little bit because some people might not know what that is. I mean, they've become real popular in recent years, but also the term has become pretty watered down. There are some there's a whole subsection of the fan base that will go, well, actually, and while they're pushing their glasses up, at this point, talking about exactly what a fucking roguelike is, but for my purposes, because I'm going to be the one probably talking about roguelikes more than anybody else here, what I'm considering a roguelike is it has to have at least a handful of the things you would consider in a traditional roguelike, meaning permadeath, turn-based movement, turn-based combat. Those are really the big three, but then also, you got procedural generation of dungeons, procedural generation of the world sometimes, procedural generation of items, which I think is a big deal. I have played some that actually have procedural generation of the critters, the monsters you face, which is kind of unusual. That doesn't happen a lot, but in any event, so those are some of the big points of a roguelike.
Well, and then there's also the term roguelite, which if you say it fast enough, you don't know which one the person's saying. But I guess a roguelite has some of those features, but usually not the permadeath. Usually I think most roguelites are the type where you expect to die a lot, but you also expect to gain something in each iteration in which you're playing it so that you can make it further on each subsequent life.
Actually, yeah, that's called a meta progression. And that is one of the, I've got like I'm this big of a nerd. I make a spreadsheet about every damn thing. So I made a spreadsheet here with like, I don't know, 25 or 30 different games and 25 or 30 different aspects of those games. Some of which I look for, some of which I like, and some of which I hate. And I actually assign numbers to all these so that I could rank them.
You're very cerebral that way, and I think that's awesome. Now, I will say I do get that way about a lot of things. Last time I bought a car, I had a spreadsheet that I did almost the exact same thing, where I had probably 10 different makes and models and had all of these things I was looking for, and I assigned values to all of them and came up with this objective way to determine what car I needed to buy. Okay, so I completely get it. But I don't feel the same way about video games. Like every time that I play a video game, there may be specific things that I'm looking for, but I also know that the way that they're implemented in the game a lot of times can be a big turn on or turn off to me. So like, you mentioned procedural generation. I love games that are heavy in procedural generation, but some are really good at it and you get surprised by what you run into. And some, it just looks like it's a different way to arrange the bricks in a wall. Right. You know what I mean? Yep. So
I totally agree. And one of the things that actually kind of came out of this and in making all of this is I kind of expected the games I liked the best to kind of filter to the top after I made this, complicated spreadsheet. That didn't work out that way. And part of the reason it didn't work out that way is I only have 3 different buckets I threw everything in, like, can live with or live without, and hate, right?
Well, I think you've got a bunch of categories, but how they get weighted too.
Right.
That's part of it, right?
So what I really need to do to make this list work out the way I envisioned it to is I would need to subcategorize those and because some of them, like some of the things I like, I really, really like. And some of the things I hate, I really, really hate. So, there would need to be more divisions. I decided not to go that far, but what I ended up finding out was that the numbers were kind of meaningless in the end because, like, a good example, and this is not in my list at all, Fallout 2. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Now, I can't go back and play it really anymore because I know too much about the game. Like, I know where I can find everything. There's nothing surprising in it. And this is part of the problem with it. But anyway, it's one of my favorite games. It has no procedural generation in it at all.
Right.
Everything is static. It'll be the same thing every time you play it. And that's one of the reasons I can't go back and play the game again.
And I will say that's something that, most games, when we're talking about old school games, they're all that way. I mean, there are some with procedural generation, and
some with spawning, which means you can still go back and play it. Some with random loot, so you can still go back and play it. Stuff like that.
Yeah. To a certain extent, yes, you're right. Something that that I wish more of the older games had that most modern games have is modding, and that's just something that I just think is. That's probably one of the biggest advances in modern gaming is that you can take a game that you love and people continue to build on it and build content. And some of it's ridiculous, but some of it is really, really good too. So I mean that
I'm going to interject here just because this is not on the list of games at all because it does not fit. I mean, it technically is kind of an old school RPG, but it does not fit the wizards and warriors kind of stereotype that I forced everything into for this discussion. Jagged Alliance 2. That game is 30 years old now, I think. It has been continually under modification pretty much since it was released. And like right now, Jagged Alliance 2 with the 1.3 mod and some of the sub mods you can get for it is one of the most complicated, interesting, I have replayed that game probably more than any other game I have in my arsenal. And I don't know, every couple of years I'll pull it out and play it again. As janky and as old as it is, when it's done when a game is done that well and it has that level of heart, it's I don't know, it just grabs you. It's really, really hard to let go of. So
Well, and I know that you and I are probably going to talk about some games that you and I have both loved because we've talked about them in the past. And when you talk about how much heart is in something, how much effort went into it, how much that it just grabs you and holds on to you, I can think of a couple. I'm not going to spoil it yet. But you mentioned about going back and playing an older game and it being janky. That's something that, it stops me, and it's unfortunate because there are games that I love. One example I'm going to use is the Might and Magic series.
Right.
Okay. I know that you had played several of those games before I had ever played, but I played Might and Magic 4 and 5, which were the World of Zine games.
Yep.
And loved them.
And then the 6, 7, and 8, which everybody loved. Yeah.
Exactly. And like one of my favorite things, and it was one of those, I think it was 6. I don't remember I'm not sure. But one of the mechanics of the game that I loved was how you could form your party. And this is probably almost like people use the term zerging something now, right? Where you just go and throw everything you got at it and you don't care who dies. Like I would do that. I remember there was this one area that had a bunch of hydras in it that were really hard to kill, and they would come at you at like 3 to 5 at a time. Well, the mechanic in the game was that if you killed anything, you immediately got the loot from it. So I would step into this area, like get attacked by 5 hydras, kill one and lose most of my party, and immediately leave the area, take my loot with me, which was really good stuff that dropped. And I would start
and build some new characters. Yeah,
exactly. And then go, revive everybody and do all that again. That's not the way it was meant to be played. I know, but that idea of I'm doing something that I'm barely hanging on to with skin in my teeth right now, but I'm gearing up and I'm progressing to the point where I'm going to be able to go there and just wipe the grounds with them in a few more levels. That's a lot of fun.
So that mechanic, not that particular implementation of it, but that mechanic where you basically keep throwing yourself at a dungeon so you can just build up power. That's called grinding. Yeah. And that is one of the things I actually really like about games. I really like games where there's a grinding mechanic to it. For that reason, I like to go into an area and be overpowered. That is actually, I figured this out a few years ago. It took me years to kind of figure this out. That's what I like about games, actually. Mm-hmm. I like breaking games. That's why I like complex systems.
Yeah.
I like a system because when a system reaches a certain level of complexity, it can't be balanced. Unless it's just like real life, you know what I'm saying? Because real life, there's so much stuff going on that, everything is fighting everything else. So right. You get a balance, right? But in games, the more complex they get, typically, the more breakable they are.
And you say breakable, I'm going to use a different term. I'm going to say that you're taking advantage of the complexity of it, right? You're understanding where the strengths are of having certain builds or certain maneuvers or things like that. And I think that exists in a lot of games, to the point where it's boring if it's too balanced.
Right.
But at the same time, they have to be built in a way so that, when you're talking about most of these games, you're usually talking about choosing a race and a class and blah, blah, blah. And, you'll see people on message boards or Reddit or whatever, and they'll be like, okay, well, what's the best, race class combination, or what's the best this or best that?
And unfortunately, if there is one, it's immediately boring.
Exactly.
If there has to be, there at least has to be a certain number of best, maybe 3 or 4. I mean, Wizardry, which is one of the games I want to talk about, Wizardry, both 7 and 8, are two of the games that really strike me like this because D.W. Bradley, I think, was the designer of those games, who also did Wizards and Warriors and a couple other games I played that I really liked. But he was big on this kind of thing, and you have certain race class combos in both those games that are absolute shit. If you pick those race class combos, you're going to have a bad time. But you have other ones where you're going to have a good time. And then you have other ones where you're going to have a really good time, And it's to me, in those games, part of the reasons for that are not the system itself. It's the loot is not procedural. The loot is fixed. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, if you pick a female fairy ninja, right? It's such a weird combination, but they put very powerful items that can only be used by a female fairy ninja. So you're gonna have a real good time if you put one of those in your party. That to me, I don't like. Okay, I don't like it being loot defined. But they also have race class combos that it's just, if you look at them, you can look at the system and you can say, ooh, this race should work really well as this class, you know? And when you put those together, it does. It's just a magical combination. It works great.
You know, for example, your typical fighter, right? So your typical fighter in any game is going to be a tank, right? It's somebody that's going to have high strength, high constitution,
Hopefully high dex too, but
yeah, but there's certain things that you look for that. And then when you're trying to combine that, whether it be with the race that you pick or whatever build that you're putting around it, you're wanting to accentuate those things. You're wanting to pick a race that's going to be, an orc or something, something that's big and strong. And that's where, like you said, you pick like a fairy or, even an elf or whatever, in most cases, those combinations are not going to work as well because there's no synergy between the race and the class. And, and I'm like you, like, I want to choose that because that's what I want to build. That's what I have in my mind of, it's almost like a pen and paper RPG where you have this idea of, I want to play a character who acts like this, who does this, who has these attributes or whatever when you're doing it. And sometimes you don't want to go with just the archetype. You want to do something that's a little unique and different. Maybe it gives you a little more of a challenge. But then if you get hampered by having loot that's driven toward a specific build or a specific archetype, well, yeah, that hurts you, and frankly, it makes you feel like you're playing a different game than they built.
And this is, I think, one of the unfortunate things of most pen or most computer RPGs, especially the ones based on, the typical Lord of the Ring kind of tropes, are really at their core some bastardization of the D&D system, and that's where I think they fail the most, is because, and this is where roguelikes shine, because that system, first of all, I'm not a fan of that system. I think it peaked at depending, it was at its most broken at the end of first edition with Unearthed Arcana and all that kind of stuff, which I have a special place in my heart for that. Yeah. It was at its most versatile, I think, at 3.5 or Pathfinder, which takes 3.5 and basically steroidizes the shit out of it, and I think every version after that has gotten worse. You've gotten less choice. You've gotten, it's less important what you do, more important that you get the right equipment. It's less versatile. But the problem with those systems in a traditional CRPG, like pretty much all of the ones that are, even Baldur's Gate, and Baldur's Gate 2 were like this,
right?
Is all the loot is fixed. So in D&D, loot is a big part of
progression.
Right. It's a huge, enormous piece of it. So, if you don't have the right perk system in place, or where you can really make your character unique and versatile and do what you want them to do, and you don't have the right equipment, you're hamstrung. And this is where I really like roguelikes, because almost all roguelikes are based on that D&D system. And roguelikes, because of the procedural loot generation, that right there nullifies that whole problem. You can have a run where you're like, oh, I've got this great idea for a character, and it's a great idea, it really is. And you just never get the fucking loot you want.
Right.
But it's possible for you to get the loot. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you keep coming back and trying it until when it finally works out and you get it, you're like, yeah, Well,
so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I think that bothers me about some games, but that I really like in others. And that's how they restrict loot. So you think of a sword, and anybody, literally anybody that has a hand and arm can pick up a sword and swing it, right? But it's your proficiency in that should matter. It's like, and I guess your physical attributes, stronger person's going to swing it harder, that sort of thing. But, so many games will want to say like, okay, wizards can't use that or whatever, that sort of thing. Or
and often don't even give a fucking reason. That's the worst part.
Exactly. And same thing for like armor. At least a little bit they do that with like, okay, somehow if you're a wizard, you can't wear metal armor because it interferes with your ability to.
Not because J.R.R. Tolkien decided that Gandalf wasn't going to wear fucking armor. That couldn't be it at all.
But I do really like it if there's restrictions, it's restrictions that are based more on something that's lore of the game, right? Where they actually give you a reason. And I know a lot of it's for balance reasons, and that makes sense. I mean, because, in most systems, wizards are incredibly powerful, and the way that you balance that out is you make them squishy, right? So, if you suddenly can have a wizard in a tank, you're in big trouble. So they have to balance it. But if they can, when they find ways to actually build it within the system of the game where it makes sense, and it's not just where you get slapped on the hand when you try to do it, or you're just told you can't for some unknown reason, that's certainly a lot more enjoyable for me.
Yep. Yeah, I really think, I don't know. Some of the old school RPGs that are my favorites, like, Wizardry 7 and 8, for example.
And by the way, that's exactly what I was referring to when I was talking. Okay, so do you remember the phrase, Wizardry 7? What? The verbiage phrase.
Oh, yeah. So, vociferously spewing a barrage of animated verbiage.
Yes, I was looking so hard when we were talking about doing this show. I wanted to find like a video clip or something of that, and I could not.
I'll find it. Yeah. It's I've actually played Wizardry 7 within the last 10 years.
Okay,
it still holds up, man. It is clunky. It is low res. But man, there's just so much heart in that. Surtech, when they went under, that was the biggest loss for computer gaming, I think, ever. More than Sierra. Because by the time Sierra went under, they were making shit. But Surtech's last game was fucking great. Like, it was just, there was, Surtech made the Jagged Alliance series. They made the Wizardry series. They were just so fucking good. There was so much heart in their games. But anyway, everything in that game, from the S Draw Cab Monks, which took me way longer than I want to admit to realize was the backwards monks.
Right,
You know what I'm
and
saying?
it was spelled backwards. Yeah,
right.
That was great.
Like, it's just so, the little puzzles they had in it, and I hate puzzles, but they were just so well done. It was, you could not get mad at. I mean, that is the game I spent more nights up all fucking night playing than any other game I can remember.
Yeah. Well, and you and I stayed up many nights together playing some of those when we were roommates and stuff. So I mean, absolutely. So looking back at those old school games like that, though, there are you were talking about puzzles, okay? And there's, first of all, a puzzle just for the sake of a puzzle kind of pisses me off in a game. It's like, okay, it's not just that, okay, here's a chest that's closed that you got to open, but now you've got to figure out, this puzzle in order to open the chest.
Speaking of that, this game, I didn't include it in here, and I should have. The best way that has ever been done, that I can remember, is the Betrayal at Krondor series. The way those chests were, they had puzzles for every single one of those fucking chests. And I hate puzzles.
Yeah.
And it was so well done, man. It felt real. It felt like a real thing.
Well, I mean, even like the more recent Elder Scrolls games where you're doing lockpicking in those games.
Yeah, but it's not as, I don't know.
But it feels a little bit like picking the lock. It's not just, it's not just rolling a die and seeing whether you did it or not. And it's not, okay, I've got to complete some weird inane puzzle in order to do it. It actually feels like you're doing something. Now, it gets a little boring.
Wizardry 8 had that. Wizardry 8 had lockpicking puzzles as well.
It did.
So I mean, but I mean, the Betrayal at Krondor, it was just so, I don't know. It's one of those things, like I never even played all that much of the game. I could not get that far in it because there was something janky about it that drove me nuts. But I remember those chests to this day being one of the best, the chess puzzles being one of the best parts of the game. But I mean, I'm with you. I can't stand a puzzle just to be a damn puzzle. Like, I don't like puzzles to start with. Don't put them in the middle of my game. You know,
I like puzzles when that's what I'm trying to do is solve a puzzle. But if I'm trying to play a role playing game, don't throw puzzles at me just for the fun of it.
I'm never trying to solve it. So that's not my idea of a good time.
It's like, if you want the loot, do the Sudoku. I mean, it's.
I don't know. I like Sudoku, but
I knew I said it wrong, but you know what I meant.
Yeah.
So, okay, as far as those mechanics go, right? So puzzles, okay, obviously you're not a fan of puzzles. I'm not really either. But what about, like, when we're talking about these old school games, there's a lot of things that I feel like modern games don't really do to you the way that old school games did. And in some way they're good, in some way they're bad. Like, there's a couple of mechanics that I hated in some of those old games, and I was just curious if you had more of that. But one of them. Okay, you're talking about Wizardry, the very first Wizardry game. What was it? Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord.
Yep.
You got to this one level, and this was just literally mazes that you're walking through, right?
Are you talking about teleporters?
Yeah, well, teleporters and spinners.
Yeah.
And
that was
dark rooms.
So. Okay, so Bard's Tale had those too, and it annoyed the shit out of me. The problem was, and this is what people who've only played newer games don't realize, that was before auto mapping.
Right. Yeah,
so,
you're sitting there with your graph paper.
Right. And you hit one of these motherfuckers, and sometimes they were really sneaky about it because it looked, when you hit it, you didn't know the hallway ahead of you looked exactly the same as the hallway you came from, but you weren't. You were in someplace different. And before you knew it, you were fucking up the map you had already drawn. And you were like, I don't know where this changed.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And no, like I've hard quit games because of that. You know, like it's just, that's a bridge too far, man. You can't do that to people. That's awful. I one of the things I didn't like at the time, but now that point buy systems are basically the way you do almost every, when you get the option of actually putting, numbers by your attributes when the thing doesn't do it for you. Now that point buy systems are the rage, I kind of like rolling for my fucking attributes. Like, I hated it like that. I hated it at the time because I hated sitting there for 3 fucking hours trying to get, the right set of attributes, for something like a monk or something, that you just had to have an, awesome roll for. But now I kind of dig it. Like, I really enjoy it when I play a game that has a dice roll mechanic for attributes.
Well, I remember playing, I want to say it was Eye of the Beholder.
Oh, yeah. Those old SSI games.
Yes,
yeah.
And those were great. I mean, they were literally licensed AD&D games,
The only problem with them was they were real-time combat. Like, I've played them recently, too, and that always stops me.
But to your point, you would build your character and you'd roll the dice to get your attributes first, and then you would only be able to pick the classes that matched with whatever those minimums were. And it was like you had to keep going back and forth. It's like, you want to make a monk, okay, you got to have 16 decks or whatever. If you don't get that, you can't make a monk. So
yeah, it was first edition D&D, so it was all hardcore shit, man. It was like, you want to make a monk. I think monks had to be humans too in first edition D&D. So first of all, you got no bonuses or minuses on your attributes because you're fucking human, right? And then you got to hit, I think it was like 4 attributes you had to have a 12 or higher on to be a monk. So it's like, that's hard as shit when you're rolling dice, when you're rolling, because it was 3d6 at the time. It wasn't any of this, roll it 4 times and take the best 3 or any shit like that. It was, you roll 3d6 and what you got's what you got,
Yeah. And I think anybody, and okay, so you just completely nerding out here, and just aside from the computer games, you and I have both run campaigns in other role-playing systems, pen and paper role-playing systems. We've both been game masters in multiple different gaming systems as well. I think every time I've ever done that, when I've been in charge of people, creating their characters in those games, I always cheat on that. Like I never have made somebody just roll 3d6 and do it every time.
I used to be such a hard ass. Like I really did. I really used to run games as like me versus the player. Like that's I used to do that. Now though, like more recently, I've actually gotten to the point where I'm almost like, in fact, I did this in our D&D campaign. I was like, tell me what numbers you want. If you can justify why your character
Right,
has
yeah.
those numbers, I'll give them to you. I don't want you munchkinning. I don't want you min-maxing. I want you to build me a story
Yep.
and tell me why your character is this badass if you want them to be a badass.
And I love that. I mean, so, again, going back to the computer games, one of the things that computer role-playing games have always had a hard time doing is matching the storytelling of what you have in pen and paper role-playing games. And any computer game can tell a story. I mean, you've seen some, you were talking about Fallout. I mean, everybody kind of knows the story behind Fallout and, in those games and what's there. And it's a great storytelling mechanism. Same thing for like Baldur's Gate and, what was the one I'm trying to think of? Planescape, Torment.
That was a great story.
That was a great, all of that. Like, there's a lot of great stories there, but they're linear.
And they have to be. They kind of have to be kind of generic. Like like all the Oblivion or Skyrim, they all have to be kind of generic because the more they tighten up that story, the less options you have to create a character that you want to create and play the character you want to play.
Well, that's right. But also, like in a pen and paper game, there are a lot of things that you can do when you're thinking outside the box on how to solve problems or what to do next, or, go murder hobo, whatever it is that you want to do, that in many games, you just like, there's almost not the technical ability to supply the option of doing all those things.
This is a whole nother podcast, but this is actually one of the things I'm most excited. This is almost the only thing I'm excited about AI, about generative AI.
Uh-huh.
Generative AI has the potential to turn this shit on its ear.
That's true. That's true.
I've been waiting since I was a small child to be able to, because honestly, like when I was a kid, all I wanted was to play D&D all the time with no other fucking people. I literally, you know what I'm saying?
Spoken like a true introvert.
I wanted some way for the fucking computer to do what a good GM would do.
Yeah.
That would have been my paradise.
Yep.
Right. And we have the potential of that happening very soon.
Yeah. But to that point, that's something that I feel like there's a few, so one of the things as you went along with, as computer role-playing games adapted and improved, one of the things that became really common, and we've seen this in a lot, I really noticed it when we got to like Oblivion, but I know it was there before that. That's just the first thing that comes to mind, is where you can go pick up like literally everything in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you can just,
to the point where you eventually figure out most of the shit's junk and I just need to leave it alone.
Exactly. But it's like it gives you that extra option.
Right.
And then we saw other games where there was the interaction or synergies between multiple things, so like, somebody can cast, I don't know, let's just say like a frost kind of spell and it freezes the ground, and then somebody else can cast something that causes the air to blow and it sweeps everybody away because they slip and slide, knock them down or whatever, that sort of thing.
The whole Pillars of Eternity, or the,
right.
What are the Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So like those types of things are innovations that we see nowadays that I feel like old school games weren't that good at either. You tended to be a very limited option.
I will say there's at least one exception to that. And you're going to hear, if I don't mention this, I'm going to get crucified by anyone who actually knows roguelikes. That is Nethack. Okay. Nethack, the phrase that gets thrown around is the devs have thought of everything, because there is all that shit in there. There is shit in there like, if you follow like a unicorn around, or not a unicorn, like a phoenix around, it'll eventually lay an egg, and then you can take that egg, and if you hold it on your thing for long enough, it'll hatch, and you get a baby phoenix. I mean, there's shit like you when you find sinks or fountains, you can break the fountain and the water will come spewing out all over the floor, and then you can freeze the water, and like there's all kind of stupid shit like that in Nethack. They have thought of every fucking thing.
Well, and I think a lot of people would probably throw something like Dwarf Fortress into something like that.
Yeah,
too, right?
I don't know. I have not played enough of Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode to know that. I know in the standard mode, there's a lot of that stuff. There's like, you've got all of the physics behind how water flows and where the water table is and aquifers and shit like it is so incredibly complex. So yes, there are roguelikes where people have gone to those links. But it's not common. And even in roguelikes, for people to actually think that.
So let me ask you. So, you and I talked about this previously that, I have a great love for CRPGs. Never played a lot of roguelikes. I think for me, the reason I haven't played a lot of roguelikes is that I don't like the idea of permadeath. I don't like the idea of working hard to build my character up only to have something happen and they die and I have to start all over again.
So my suggestion to you for something, if that's your biggest problem, is to play one of the more modern ones where they have meta progression. And the one I'm going to suggest for you is probably Dungeonmans. Okay.
Dungeonmans?
Dungeonmans.
Okay. I actually saw you playing that on Steam not that long ago, and I put it. I looked at a couple of videos on Steam, and I put it on my wish list. I just haven't got it yet. But
there's some great parts about this game. So let me kind of go through. Okay. First of all, it's got a huge amount of meta progression. So not only do you the story, roguelikes are not big on story, but the story behind this thing is basically there's the Dungeonmans Academy, which is where they train heroes to go out and kill monsters and loot.
Sounds very
temples.
Original.
Yeah. But the headmaster's like very upfront. You're probably going to fucking die, right? And he kind of, there's all this tongue in cheek, like, oh, you're the chosen one. Now go off and, die. Anyway. So there's but over the course of time, you end up building up the academy. You get new wings. You improve certain parts of it,
right,
to where when you do die and your dude comes back, they can go get trained up to a certain level, and then they can get equipment that you've stored for them with your other characters, or they can, for example, you find blocks of stone that have artifacts inside,
right,
that your artificer, when you come back with your next character, will have cracked those blocks open, and you'll get brand new artifacts that you couldn't get in the previous run through. Or, for example, one of the things that if you like roguelikes, this is kind of one of the charming aspects of it. If you don't, it's probably not. One of the things that's big on roguelikes is identification, especially with potions and scrolls. There's a whole strategy around identification on a lot of roguelikes, where some of them use-based identification makes sense and some of them it doesn't, because the results are so potentially catastrophic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a risk-reward thing. Anyway, Dungeonmans lets you get around that. That does have identification, but it lets you get around that by you can when your previous character comes back, they can tell the potion, the alchemist guy or the librarian guy about the things they found, and that librarian guy or alchemist guy will write it all down, and then your next character can just go get that. So, but not only all that, which is really cool. There's another part of that where when you die in some deep, dark dungeon somewhere, that dungeon's still there for your new character, and he can come back and find your old dead dude and get his shit
and loot him.
Okay. So
yeah,
it's actually really, really satisfying.
So okay, and that does sound interesting to me, but that, like you said, that's more of the meta progression. So what I tend to think of when I'm thinking of rogue, I'm about to say the wrong way. Rogue likes is that you're starting over and over again, right? So it's almost like old school games. I mean, you take something like, Asteroids or Pac-Man, and your goal is not to progress. I mean, yeah, you want to get to further levels or whatever, but it was like you were trying to get a high score. Like back in the day, that was the thing. Like I wanted to get a high score. I wanted to put my initials on the console. And every time you put your quarter in, you're starting over from scratch and you're trying to get further, get more points, that sort of thing.
I guess there is a little bit of that, but that's not really how I look at it. Like it's more like, and some games are like that. Like one of my favorite games is roguelikes is T.O.M.E. Not T.O.M.E. Actually, I like T.O.M.E. too. T.O.M.E. I like T.O.M.E. 2 a lot. I like T.O.M.E. 4 okay. But no, A.D.O.M is the one I was thinking of, which is
Ancient Domains of Mystery. Yes. I have that one.
Okay, so A.D.O.M is fantastic. It's probably my favorite roguelike, or very close to it. But I can't play it much anymore because I've found a particular race and class combination that is just, it works so well with how I like to play the game that I can't improve on it, and so it's boring now, right? I know how to beat it with that particular combination, and it's boring to play any other combination.
Yeah.
But it has a little bit of this problem. Well, it has a lot of this problem because the world map is static. And while the dungeons are randomly generated and the loot's randomly generated and all that kind of stuff, you do tend to go through the same pattern every time to get a character up to a certain point, right? So that gets boring after a while, because you're going to visit the first town, and then you're going to go to the tiny cave, and then you're going to go, you know all the places you're going to go, right, and basically what's going to happen there. And it's really frustrating to get about halfway through this beginning part before you ever really started the real game. You're just in the beginning part, and you get fucking killed. That gets really frustrating really fast. But with something like Dungeonmans, it's really not like that. The first 6 or 7 levels go by so fucking fast that it's really and it's kind of enjoyable while it's happening.
Yeah.
It's really not a big deal.
Well, I feel like even if death is part of the progression, as long as I felt like I was making progression, I would probably enjoy it more. So this is not quite, it's not a roguelike, but for a long time I played EverQuest. Right. Okay. And, I don't know if we want to get into MMORPGs in here, but
they're high on my list of things I despise.
I know. So, I mean, you and I played EverQuest for a little while together, and I know you got turned off by the idea of waiting in line to kill orcs, right? So you're absolutely right. And then, everything tended to go toward this theme park kind of aesthetic, which was different. And then, I mean, I don't play any MMORPGs anymore. But probably the best gaming experience I've ever had. And you've touched on a couple of things here that I really found in EverQuest back in the day that, I keep feeling like I want a game that's going to recreate this for me. And I just don't know if it's going to happen. And it's sad. But one of them is that when I was playing EverQuest, you had this idea of a corpse run, right? Like you really did not want to die somewhere because, you didn't start over. It wasn't like a roguelike where you had to start over at level 1, but you respawn and wherever your spawn point is naked and you've got to go right and get your stuff back from wherever you died. And if you are deep in some dungeon somewhere that's surrounding, you were killed by some really powerful stuff, you're probably not going to be able to get down there and get your stuff back. You got to beg
motherfuckers to come with you to do it.
Yeah, or pay, you could pay a necromancer to summon your body or something like that. But it would cost you. You know what I mean? Like it was difficult. Now I hated the corpse run idea of it. Okay. So I'm glad that that's not a thing anymore in most modern games. But a consequence of that is that there were places in EverQuest that seemed almost mythical. Like it wasn't a case of when I progress enough, I'm going to go do that thing. You really wondered whether you ever would or not.
This is the best part of roguelikes. This is the best part of the permadeath part of roguelikes.
Yeah.
Because there are times when you're playing a roguelike and you will come across some item or some artifact that you might never have seen before, right? Or it might be so fucking rare, right? and you get it, and now you're like, I got to protect the precious, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like this is the like I can't fuck this up, right? And you get so protective over the character, right?
Yeah.
And there are places like that, like you're talking about, that are kind of mythical, like T.O.M.E 2. T.O.M.E is Tales of, I can't pronounce the last word. It's Maj'Eyal or some shit like that. Now it used to be Tales of Middle Earth. Okay.
Okay.
It used to be based on Middle Earth, and T.O.M.E 2, especially with some of the mods, you can actually play the characters. You can play Gandalf, or you can play Aragorn, or you can play the hobbits. Like you can do all of that stuff, and you meet all the characters, and you fight the Nazgul, and like all that shit's in there. Okay. And there are places in that, like for instance, down deep in Durin's Hold or whatever it is, where you can actually fight the Balrog, that are mythical. Like when you get, like I did that as Aragorn once, and I remember being down in there and seeing just literally hundreds of critters, all of them badass, coming at me, and I'm like, oh fuck, I got to figure some shit out right now, like that, because of the permadeath. It's kind of like, I read this book years ago, The Metamorphosis of Prom Intellect.
Yep, I've read it as well now.
Okay, good. You remember the part in that book where they were talking, there's this theme that goes through where it's kind of like, once death has been solved, death is meaningless. So it's like, they actually think it's fun to go on these things.
Right. Yeah. That they would literally go and die in thrilling ways to experience it because
it didn't mean anything. Right.
Yeah.
That is what a roguelike is at its core, because it's like, like when you first start out, it doesn't matter, right? It's a first level, whatever, who gives a shit, right? Mm-hmm. I died stupidly, who cares, right? But once you get to a certain point, it's like, oh shit, this is really rough now. Like now, if I lose this, I've lost all this fucking time and effort I've sunk into this character.
Right.
And it's not going to be the same next time. You might not find the precious next time. You might find something better. Right. But it's so fucking rare, it's not real likely.
But see, I think that's what turns me off from it, is that I don't want to have spent all that time. Like, I don't want to have the stress of, okay, I don't even want to go do any more dungeons. I don't want to go do anything else because there's too much risk to it. You know what I mean? Like it almost.
So I don't ever get to that point.
Okay.
But I will tell you something. You can do something called save scumming, where you can like most roguelikes, the way they work is they delete the save file when you die. So what you do is you figure out a way to back up the save file before it deletes.
Sure.
So, you can do, it's really frowned upon, but you can do.
Well, and I don't want to do that.
And even in A.D.O.M will let you actually save it. Like you can cut permadeath on or off. And most modern roguelikes are like that. They'll let you cut permadeath on or off. I do think it detracts from the experience, though. I think that's part of the charm of the roguelike, is that, and that's why I like the meta progression so much, the meta progression mechanics so much, because when you have a roguelike that does have permadeath, but also has the meta progression, it gives you a reason to die. It gives you, it's, when you die, it's not the end of everything, but it still hurts.
Yeah. Well, and I do, that I don't want to make it sound like I don't want there to be consequences to death in one of these games. In fact, I think it's really boring if there's not. I mean, you've got some games where you have, like a stack of resurrection scrolls, and as long as you can get one person through the fight, then you can just resurrect the rest of the party.
Modern games, you have checkpoints, and you can't ever go back past that checkpoint, right? So it's like a lot of modern like adventure games, like they're just fucking meaningless to me, because it's like, you can't ever lose. Like, there's no losing in it's not like Wizardry was, where, you could get poisoned at some point, or diseased, and not really realize it. And it's permanently reducing your stats the whole time you're diseased, and you don't really realize that yet. And then, like, by the time you do realize it, you're like, oh shit, I've overwritten my save. Fuck,
Always save it a new slot.
Right. But that's how we learned that lesson.
That's right.
Like, I like that. Like, I like there being like real fucking harsh ass consequences for fucking up.
Another thing that old school RPGs did that I didn't like, but I feel like has largely been cared for in newer games is soft locking. Like I remember playing a lot of games, and I want to say even like Wizardry 7 was one of those where if you did something in the wrong order or you went somewhere before you had the widget that you needed to have to go there, you could get yourself stuck.
Yep.
And the only way to get out of that was to go back to a save file that was before you made that mistake. And sometimes it could be way back.
Yep.
And that's really frustrating.
Well,
So,
I think Wizardry 8 had a couple of those, and they were fixed in patches. So you don't. I honestly have not seen that in a long time.
Well, right, and that's what I'm saying. Like I remember it from some of the old school games. You don't really see it anymore, and it's a design concept when they're building the games. They're trying to account for all those things. I think that the gaming industry and CRPG industry has matured to a point where they know this is a really negative experience for players. We got to prevent this at all times possible. So
right. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I was when I was going through this and I was kind of looking up all the things I hate. Like, there's really not that many of them, honestly. There's like 7 things I just don't like.
Okay.
I don't like any kind of twitch mechanic. So if I have to react, like,
so Dark Souls is not for you.
Fuck no. I don't. I will play games that have this mechanic, but I don't like it. I don't like survival mechanics.
So like food and water and things like
and that's a staple of roguelikes, man. Like most roguelikes have some kind of survival mechanic, food and water. But like then you've got other games like The Long Dark, where that's basically the whole fucking game.
Yeah.
I can't stand that shit.
Well, I don't mind them when you can just plan ahead for them. Like again, I bring up EverQuest, and that's again, it's not, I don't know, do you call it an old school RPG? I mean, it's been around since like 1999, but
I have a hard time calling any MMORPG.
but you have to have food and water in there. But you can, you get different types of food and different types of water that gives you, or different types of liquid, I should say, that give you different bonuses if you've consumed them and things like that. And you can plan ahead and have a stack of them and kind of not worry about it until later on when you're getting low and you got to refresh your supplies. There are a lot of games that are like that. You can just kind of plan ahead. And as long as you make sure you've got your supplies, you're okay.
Well, see, this is kind of why I dislike it, though. Like, either it's meaningful or it isn't. Okay? So, if it's something that it's just basically you have to re-up every now and again, and it's it's you can carry fucking 6 months worth of it on you or whatever, then just make it like a taxation. Just make it to where it sucks money out of my bank account every so often, and I'm upped on food and water. Like, or is it something where like water actually weighs 8 pounds a gallon, and so carrying the shit around with you is a pain in the ass, and you don't want to do that all the time.
Well, and some games are like that for sure.
So like I do kind of feel like it either needs to not be there at all or it needs to be meaningful.
Sure.
But I don't like the fucking mechanic. Well, so if I do
it can be tedious.
Right.
I think that's the thing is like, you don't want to be concentrating on progression in the game and constantly be like, okay, I got to find water again. Okay, I got to find food again. And it's like, that's just to maintain the status quo. It doesn't get you anywhere. It's just the maintenance of your character. And that becomes boring.
Right.
I get that.
Yeah. So, I don't like the survival mechanic. Let's see. I don't like I don't like caps at all. But I really dislike level caps. Like, I despise a fucking game that tells me I can't get beyond a certain level of power. Like, in fact, when I'm playing an RPG and I reach max level, I can guarantee you I will quit the game within an hour. Like, I just, why play anymore? The game's over, you know?
Yeah. No, I kind of feel like that's something else that you don't see as much as you used to, but I think that's because...
I mean, it's in almost every big game right now.
Well, but, I mean...
Like, you run out of levels in Divinity Original Sin 2 well before the end. You run out of it in Pillars of Eternity well before the end. You run out of it in... probably in Baldur's Gate 3, though I haven't played it enough to know. You run out of it in both the Pathfinder games. well before the end.
Maybe I'm just not grinding as much as you are, because I feel like I rarely ever run into that. But maybe it's because I try to do all the side quests and all the other kind of stuff. But some games you can just go and grind to get stronger before you get to.
Well, you can't really in those games. They don't have.
Well, that's true because they don't
have
respawn.
They don't have respawn.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I'm just a completionist. I do all the things.
Yeah.
So and if you do all the things, then you will run out of. And I just don't like that. I want, I'm even fine with, like, there are games that have like Dungeonmans is like this. It doesn't really have a cap, but to go from level, I think 15 to level 16, you have to get something like 999 million experience, which basically is going to take you for fucking ever. Like, you could do it theoretically, right? But it's going to take so fucking long. I'm even okay with that, even though I do generally quit once I hit level 15. But
so I'm going to throw a completely different mechanic at you from a completely different genre, but that I really like the way they implemented this. Pokemon Go, okay? Going way off there, but they had a level cap for your trainer at level 40. And then they implemented a few years ago that they increased it to level 50. And it, to get from level 1 to level 40 was just experience, okay? But to go from level 40 to level 50, yes, each level requires more experience, but there's also this really in-depth quest that you have to complete at every level. So you have the experience, but you also have these other things that you have to accomplish.
I have to admit, I kind of like that.
I like that too.
That's like the first generation. So in first generation D&D, they had a very similar thing for monks. I think it was after level 10, from level 10 to 14. I think 14 was the maximum level for monks. And, or 15. But each level past 10 was a grandmaster of something.
Oh,
so
right.
Grandmaster of Wind, Grandmaster of Flowers, and so there was only so many of those. And so to get to that level, you had to defeat one of those. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of like that kind of a mechanic. But I also really like mechanics that are levelless. Like mechanics that are just skill based.
Like the Elder Scrolls games.
Right. Yeah. But again, the problem with the Elder Scrolls games is you can max those skills, and I don't like maximums. So it really annoys me to get, like, even in my own gaming systems, when I design my own gaming systems, I don't put maximums in there, but I put penalties, so it's basically, it's a percentage based thing. But if the harder the thing is you're trying to do, the harder the penalty. So you can get higher than 100 and there's no maximum, but it's so hard. It's progressively harder to get higher.
Right.
And higher
it's the law of diminishing returns. Right. So, if you're in the top 1 percentile of strength and all people on the planet, then it should be harder to get stronger than if you're in the bottom 10%.
Right. Or even more, if it's in that case, it's more about your own genetics. If you're at 99% of your genetic limit, right, then getting that last 1% is going to be, it's almost impossible. You got to basically give up the rest of your life to do that. And there is a game that actually put something like this into play. It's called Cataclysm: Dark Days Ahead.
Okay.
And they have a mechanic which I don't like, but it is realistic, called skill rust, where everything is percentile based, everything is skill based, but how your skills go up by use. Again, back almost like the Elder Scrolls were.
Yeah.
But in order to increase skills to get them really, really good, you have to use them almost exclusively, which means all your other skills decay, right? So, that
I mean, and that is realistic to a certain extent. And that's it's interesting. And I know you've probably got a couple other ones that you want to touch on, but I will just say to that, you and I have talked before about just, basic game systems, and I know that you tend to want to have systems that are as realistic as possible. And we've had these conversations about fun and playability versus realism. To me, that's one of those things that it makes it realistic, but it probably makes it less fun.
It does actually, and this was one of the things that kind of has changed my mind and made me really think about what I liked in a game. And it's really not necessarily that it's realistic, like I said before. It's more that it's exploitable. I like systems that are exploitable. I like systems that I can think about and find a hole in and say, oh, so if I do this and this, I can make this character that's really overpowered. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I like that. Like that's the fun part to me, is finding the holes in the system.
As having run games in which you were a player in them, I understand that
completely. Yeah, maybe makes me not a great player, but that's what I enjoy about games a lot. So, yeah, I mean, I also do like realism for realism's sake to a certain point. Like, one of the things I would really like to see in games that you don't see in any games ever is I would like to see, for melee weapons, I would like to see the damage they do almost entirely dependent on the person wielding it, not the weapon, because the weapon is kind of minimal. Like and we've talked about this before, and talked, privately when I was talking about my own gaming system, but a sword is when you get right down to it, a lever. Okay. So that's what a blade is. It's a lever. So it multiplies the force, but the force still comes from the person wielding the sword. So that's the most important part of the a longsword does not do 1d10 damage with a plus if you're strong. A longsword does nothing until a person picks it up and swings it.
Right.
So I would really like to see that a little more in games. I would like to see games like, when you get right down to it, D&D, which is almost all these RPGs are made off of, is materialism. That's really what it is. It's a materialistic game, because the stuff is what's important. The character actually isn't important when you get right down to the system. When you get to a system level, you can take a first level nothing and throw all the best shit on them, and they will fuck stuff up, because it's the character isn't important. It's the stuff. And I would like to see that reversed. I would like to see a system where the character is important and the stuff just adds on to it.
Well, and I get that, but at the same time, like, and I know there are mechanics that are in RPGs that I know you don't care for. Hit points is one of those as well. And I know that, when you had your gaming system you're working on, it was a lot more complex than just being a body being a bag of hit points. And I get that. But if you take that and you look at how most games are built around some level of health that you've got, and then, as you mentioned, you've got other attributes that, are going to contribute somewhat to your damage, to your ability to dodge, to your, the amount of health you've got, things like that. If you're being realistic and you're looking at your typical adventurer nowadays, in real Earth. Right. No, if you look at, you could even take somebody who is just like a well-known, strongman. I can't. Bjorn. What is
Hafthor Bjornsson?
There you go.
The mountain.
The mountain. Right. That's what I was trying to say.
Or Brian Shaw. He's much easier to pronounce.
Yeah. There you go. I like that. And you put them alongside somebody that I would just consider being exceptionally agile. Let's just say somebody that's like an MMA fighter or something like that. I think it's obvious that the strong person is going to be able to pick up something and swing it harder. I get that. And I think that should have more of an impact than it does in most of those games. But when it comes to some of the other things like health, you shoot either one of them in between the eyes and they're going to die.
Sometimes.
And I get it that, when you think of like the Constitution or whatever is going to, I would expect that, you should be able, if you would swing a sword to decapitate a person, it's probably going to work the same. I get it. The strong person is going to have thicker neck muscles. They're going to have a thicker neck. It's going to be harder to decapitate them.
Yeah, I see your point.
But
beyond a certain point, it's kind of, the distinction is kind of meaningless. Like if you drop a car on somebody, it doesn't matter how much they can bench press.
Right.
They're going to die.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's true. But if you just think about it like this, if you took a 8-year-old and you gave the 8-year-old a short sword, which they're perfectly capable of swinging, and they swing it as hard as they can at you, they're not going to cut your arm off. Okay, it's gonna stop at the bone. They're just not that strong. Okay, You take a full-grown adult male, and it kind of doesn't matter, like, how strong they are. They're going to at least break you with that same sword. Okay, so. And then if you take someone who's actually trained and knows how to use the weapon and is physically fit, they can cut your fucking arm off, right? So the person wielding the weapon matters more than the weapon. The weapon's important, but the unless you're talking about something that is just like, unless you're talking about a 308 rifle round, even guns, like, yes, I had a friend who was killed with a 22, like a 22 pistol round, which is the least pop you can have out of anything you're going to shoot. Yeah. Right. But you also have people who were shot 9 times with a 9mm and lived, like it's not that straightforward. A gun is not always overwhelming power. And the same is with every other weapon. The damage they do isn't that simple. I would like to see a system that at least tries to take that shit into it.
Yeah. So did you have were there other?
Oh yeah. We talked about decay. We talked about puzzles. I don't like puzzles. I don't like anything you have to practice. So anything where it's like, like Call of Duty fits into this pattern. Right? You got to practice with the fucking controller to get good enough, to actually be good at that fucking game. Not interested. You count me right the fuck out. Miss me with that.
Now I've never been that big into like the competitive first person shooters like that, but my oldest teenager is very, very into that, and they actually have this application on their computer that is, I can't remember the exact name, but it's aim training. I mean, it's literally a game to help you get better at aiming and shooting in first person.
Man, I feel, I just don't understand. Like, to me, I'm like, I got shit in real life that I need to practice that I don't practice. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to practice at a fucking game unless it's making me money. I mean, I guess if I wanted to be a professional competitive gamer or some shit like that,
well, sure,
I would practice, but I don't.
So another aspect of a lot of games that, again, my oldest is into, I've never been into, but talking about practicing, is speedrunning games. And that's something I've never been interested the least bit in. But I mean, there's a lot of people that are really, it's like, how fast can I beat this game?
But again, that's back to you're talking about the high score. That's all that is. That's setting a high score. Like, I do understand that urge. Sure. I did enjoy it back in the days when I played Defender and shit like that. But I don't know, man. I just expect a lot more out of a game now. Like, a game fills a different niche in my life than that.
Well, and at least what they find interesting, what I've heard and had conversations about, is that you end up playing the game differently. That you end up finding different things to focus on. And instead of, we're talking about how you're building your character or characters or, and things like that, they're looking at technique on, everything from how you get from point A to point B to what's the quickest way to get through a particular quest line to, all those types of things. And one thing I do think is a little interesting. I'm not going to do it, but it's all the glitches and things that you can find that help make you go faster,
Right.
you know? And of course that happens in every game, you know, you see it all the time in everything from like Super Mario Odyssey to, you know, the games like we're talking about here. But I do find that a little interesting that you can find, you know, hey, there's this bug that you can exploit and take advantage of in order to get another minute and a half shaved off of your game time or something
it's
like that.
There was something in, I think it was either the first or the second Fallout, where you could go basically from the starting village, if you knew about it, you could go basically from the starting village right to one of the end zones and get the fucking minigun almost immediately, like you know, first level or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think it was in Morrowind that there is a glass sword that's like it's not the village you start in, but it's a village that you can travel to really easily from where you start, that it's on top of a shelf that you can't see, but if you know it's there you can climb up and grab it, and you end up having like this really powerful sword toward the beginning of the game.
Well, see, Morrowind's one of those games that like none of that shit made any difference to me, because it's almost as soon as you could start modding Morrowind, I did. And my favorite mod still to this day of almost any mod I've ever played was a mod called Lilicor for Morrowind. It was a talking sword. And the sword, first of all, the sword was fucking hilarious. It was completely voice acted by this dude who wasn't a professional voice actor, but he did it so well. It was so good. Like I still have the voice going on in my head right now. But it also gained levels with you. It got more powerful as you got more powerful. So you never needed any other weapon. So it was fucking great. But anyway, no, like honestly, I think even the Bethesda games, you know, I would consider old school RPGs right up till you get to Skyrim. And I think Skyrim he went off the rail. He went completely into let's not have stats anymore land. And, you know, it's a good game. I enjoyed my time in it.
Yeah.
But I don't consider it the same type of game as Morrowind or Daggerfall or Arena were. Like, you know, those were old school RPGs.
Well, and something I loved in those versions that they got rid of by the time they got to Oblivion is where you could create your own spells. Like, I thought that whole concept of being able to mix and match different effects at different levels, and that it just became more power, you know, it cost more mana or whatever to cast them. Like, I loved that level of customization.
And it lets you break the game in interesting ways. Like that was one of the fun parts about it, was, you know, figuring out the flight spell and getting to fly all over the fucking place or whatever. You know, it's like there were so many things like that. Like, you know, Daggerfall was one of the fun things about Daggerfall was that it was use-based progression, which is one of the things I like in a game.
Yep.
And that meant you could go into a fucking hotel room and rent it for the week and sit there and cast Spark at the wall, you know, over and over. Now, I don't like practicing something, but in this case, it kind of made sense. I was casting Spark at the wall and watching my fucking skill level go up, and before you knew it, I could go buy a much more powerful spell, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know that I agree with you that I like that. I mean, I understand what you're saying about being able to exploit certain things in a game, but that's typically more the mechanics of the game. You know, again, it's like, okay, I know that if I cast this, or if I do these combination of things, it's really powerful. And I've figured that out through trial and error and figured out this is a really efficient way to do this. I love that. That's exploiting the mechanics to find that out. That to me is more like an actual exploit. It's like a
it's exactly what you do in real life. If you want to get better at something, you fucking practice it.
Well, you do, but you don't. I mean, it's not like flicking a bic 100 times and now I can go cast Fireball.
But it's the same. It's literally the same thing as on the fighting side. You could do the same thing by just hitting shit with your fucking weapon, right? So you're just going and hitting a practice dummy 4,000 times with your weapon. I mean, that's what the game was. You know, it didn't have a lot of, you know, feints and parries and all that kind of shit. It was basically just 3 types of whacks. You know, you had a stab and a slash and another slash, and that was pretty much it. You know?
Speaking of which, and I'll always remember this, the very first time you and I tried to play Arena.
Oh, fuck yeah. trying to figure out how to fucking hit shit. Like,
I know, because we were so used to either pressing enter or spacebar or clicking the mouse.
Yeah.
And we were like, the game's broke. It doesn't work. I think we even uninstalled it at one point and reinstalled it because we couldn't figure out how to make it work. I was like, you got to move the mouse. My God.
I think what actually happened is because I remember I had pirated the game. I had downloaded the game and pirated it. And I think what happened was we didn't have the manual.
Right.
So we were trying to play the game, this pirated, and I thought, oh, it's just broken because it's pirated, right? And so we went and bought it and brought it home, and the same fucking shit happened.
Exactly.
And we had to read the damn manual to figure out that you got to swing the fucking mouse like you're swinging the sword.
Yep.
But man, those were great too. The days of printed fucking manuals when you would take this fucking tome and you would read through it looking for, okay, how can I exploit this system?
Oh, I know.
How does that work?
And it would have like all of the spell descriptions in there, and you get some fold out color map of the world and all that kind of stuff. That was really awesome.
All great.
Yeah. So there are things that we have nowadays, though, in games that were missing in those old games. And you mentioned one of them earlier, auto mapping.
Yes.
You know, like, I feel like there are a lot of what's the term I'm looking for? Features or quality of life features is what I was trying to say, that I think just make playing games.
Yeah, the user experience is much better.
Yeah.
And that's something I kind of tried to, in my little spreadsheet, I kind of tried to encompass with the phrase modern UI.
Yeah.
So basically, the game incorporates a lot of those quality of life features that you expect, mouse control and fucking, auto maps and shit like that. I think that is one of the big barriers people have to a lot of traditional roguelikes, because they don't have a lot of those. In fact, one of my favorite ones is Incursion roguelike, which is based off of 3.5e D&D. Like the whole system is based off that, and it's very well done. Even uses one of my favorite modifications, the 3.5 edition D&D, which is armor as damage reduction instead of dodge.
Oh, okay,
basically.
right.
But a lot of people won't play that game because it is very old school roguelike. It uses the numpad to move around. Mm-hmm. You need to remember a whole bunch of fucking keyboard combinations. It's like just how it is.
So to that point, we were talking about Wizardry earlier. On the old Wizardry games, like when I was talking about Wizardry I,
mm-hmm.
all of the spells had these really obscure names to them, and that's how they were referenced in the game.
Right.
And they didn't in the game. It didn't tell you what the spells did. You had to have that manual that told you that WYSIWYG, I don't know what they were called, is a fireball, and you had to memorize what all of these obscure words and names actually meant.
I seem to remember one of the newer Ultimas having. You had to fucking move the mouse in certain ways. Like you had to draw little shit on the screen with the mouse to cast spells. It was one of the ones right around the time of Ultima Online. It was the one of the fully 3D ones. I think.
Okay.
But it was like, and I kind of dig that, man. It's like
it's unique.
Yeah,
sure.
you have to memorize stuff and you have to put a little effort into it. I don't like having to practice things. But I do like things that are just purely intellectual. You know what I'm saying? An intellectual challenge. I like that. I like being intellectually challenged. I don't like something where I have to build fucking motor memory, muscle memory to mm-hmm. fucking do it, correctly.
So one of the things that, again, going back to EverQuest, that I thought was really neat, I have an affinity for bards. I always like to play bards and all sorts of games.
I've always hated bards.
But... I love bards. And funny thing is, I've never played Bard's Tale, so I can't explain that.
Interesting. Honestly, Bard's Tale is not a bad game.
Oh, it's probably not. I just never have played it. But it had this really unique way in which bards used magic that was different than every other class in EverQuest. So if you were a wizard or a cleric or anything like that, you had this little bar where you could just click the spell that you want to cast, and if it had a target, you click the target, that sort of thing. Bards, all of their magic, or most of their magic, typically affected either it was area of effect damage or it was area of effect of buff, whatever, healing, whatever it was. But it was a melody that you played that you had to keep going. Now, there was no, you're a bard, you're playing music, but no, it didn't require any musical ability or anything like that.
Of course not. You'd have much fewer bards.
But the idea was
or people would have killed their own fucking bards. Please stop, Jesus Christ. Sounds like you're killing a fucking cat.
But what you could do there was that, to play one melody, let's just say you had something that was a healing melody, then you would click it and it would stay going, or, you would have hotkeys where you could press it and it would keep going, but it wasn't like you turned it on and off, okay? And when you turned it on, if you turned it off, it lasted for a certain amount of time after you turned it off. So what became normal for bards was what was called twisting melodies. Because you could actually play 4 at once.
Right. If you
did
them
right. Right. So everybody that was a good bard in EverQuest, you had your hotkeys set up and you would do 1 and turn it off. And then you would do 2 and turn it off. And then 3 and turn it off. And 4 and turn it off. And then start back over. And you could keep 4 melodies going at the same time for everybody in your party.
That would have been cool like the first 5 times. And then I'd have had to fucking download a program that let me do a macro for that shit. Because I would have gotten so annoyed.
And I'm sure there was, but I found it it was a challenge for me, and I enjoyed playing that. And it's one of those things, again, where you talk about, you find some exploit that makes you better at the game, that makes you able to do stuff. And frankly, and not going into all of it, but there were things that bards could do in the game. One of the things that you hear is called kiting. That
I know what kiting is.
Yeah, but because you could twist those and because you could get 4 different AoEs, you could go and get really powerful things and run around casting this AoE stuff over and over again virtually forever.
Right.
And as long as you didn't let them hit you, you could kill about anything.
Right.
if you had long enough. So, that was kind of fun.
Yeah, this is kind of a little off of that topic, but it reminded me of this. One of the things I really like about some games, which I have not seen in any modern RPGs or even old school RPGs, really, but you are seeing it in some of the better, well, I won't say better, some of the newer roguelikes now, is something called modern religious systems or complex religion. And so I'm kind of going to explain one of these. Like, in your old school religious systems, like priests in D&D, right? They're basically just magic users by another name, right? The only real difference is in D&D, priests kind of get all their spells when they level up, right? And they don't have to memorize, just cast whatever, right. It's just a slightly different magic. With these modern religious systems, you have to actually appease the fucking god. The god wants you to do certain things, and so if you do those things, the god likes you and gives you boons. But if you don't do those things, the god comes back and punishes you. So like A.D.O.M is one of my favorite games with this because you'll find altars. And the altars are aligned. Okay, like for each race, there's only 3 gods you can worship. A good one, a neutral one, and a bad one. Okay? But the altars you find are aligned to one or more gods. So like you'll find a holy altar, which is good, or a neutral altar, or an evil altar, bad, and it'll either be white, gray, or black, right? Well, one of the things you can do is you can either, depending on how you sacrifice to that altar, you can either change the altar's alignment or you can change your alignment by sacrifice. So you can actually associate yourself with a new god, which will piss your old god off, or you can change the altar, which will piss the god who owned the altar before off, but make your god potentially very happy, right? And by doing this, you get some really cool boons. Like, I always played trolls because I just love some of the mechanics about trolls. Like one of the mechanics in A.D.O.M with trolls that is just way overpowered is, in addition to them, regenerating, like trolls do, they also can devour. So when you kill something, A.D.O.M's one of those games where you have a survival mechanic.
Right.
Well, when you kill something as a troll, you can just eat it. Okay. And when you eat it, you get its intrinsics sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So, like, if you eat a fire dragon, sometimes you get a resistance to fire. And sometimes you actually even gain, like, you eat a fire giant, and not only you get resistance to fire, you might also gain higher constitution or higher strength.
I'm gonna have to go back and play A.D.O.M because I did play it some. I know you had recommended it to me a while back, and for whatever reason, it just felt like I never got very far in it.
So
I'll have to go back.
I think I sent you some things that you might want to read. A.D.O.M's one of the, most roguelikes. They call this spoilers, but they're really not spoilers. You want to do some homework before you dive in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and A.D.O.M's one of those games. I probably sent you some of the things to read.
Okay.
I'd suggest you read those. I'll tell you the combination I like to play, because I think it's the easiest combination I think to play is a trollish healer.
Okay.
Because healers have an improved healing factor, and trolls have regeneration.
Right.
So it makes it really easy to survive. The only downside is that it's a troll, so it's hungry and it eats a lot, right? But that's really not a downside, because when you eat shit as a troll, you get intrinsic.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So you just end up getting more powerful just based on your downside, right? But the one I like to play most is actually a trollless mage, which sounds stupid as shit. You think, why would you want this big, dumb fucking critter to be a magic user? It's really simple. First of all, trollish anything can beat the fuck out of everything.
Right.
Like, they're big, strong fucking brutes. So you can always clobber the shit out of anything, right? So automatically, you've got the worst part about being a mage dealt with. You're not squishy, okay?
Right.
All right. Second, A.D.O.M is one of those games where it's use-based progression. So the more you keep trying, the better at the shit you get.
Okay.
And because you can get intrinsics from eating shit, you can actually get smarter by eating shit.
Got it.
Okay. So all you have to do is kind of make sure that you've got a good selection of initial attributes. You pick the right star sign, because that's also important now. And you're pretty careful when you're low level, which is true of any character you're going to play it at. But it gets really fun really fast, because you're just this big brutish fucking thing that eats everything in sight and can cast fucking spells. And like, I don't know. It's so satisfying to take this big dude and just go and basically crush everything in your path, because you basically heal so fucking fast, nothing can kill you. And everything you kill, you get to eat. I mean, it's so fun. But anyway, yeah, A.D.O.M had, one of the things is being a troll. I was talking about the religious systems. Is that typically you're going, I mean, you can be a holy troll, but it's really hard. Typically you're going to be, if you're a mage, you're going to want to be evil. And you start out evil, so that's really easy. You might want to be neutral. That's fine too. The evil is the easiest one to appease, because basically what you can do is you can kite other critters. You can basically draw them over to the altar, and when they're standing on the altar, you sacrifice them. And they disappear in a puff of smoke. All their shit falls on the altar. And one of the things the god will do for you is he'll identify all that shit for you, if he likes you. So and he'll also bless your containers of water. And holy water is actually really important in A.D.O.M because you can dip stuff in it and give it basically bonuses.
Okay.
So there's all these little features like that when you do some of this homework I'm telling you about, you learn about, and then you've got all these little exploits you can use that take a little work, but they're really satisfying and fun to do. I mean,
well, and so just pulling it back to all games though, you talk about doing homework, and that's actually something that I love about certain games. Like, you want games to be complex enough that you feel like you can get an edge in the game by doing some homework.
Right.
That, I keep bringing it back to EverQuest, but there's a lot of games that are like this, and I'm not trying, but and actually I should say EverQuest II. I actually played EverQuest II a lot longer than I played EverQuest. But you get in that game, if you get to max level on anything, you get so many abilities or spells or whatever, that you eventually realize, when you're sitting there and you've got 35, 40 different things that your character can do, you've got to know which ones are the most efficient.
Right.
You can't just go randomly spamming buttons. You've got to know if you want to maximize your DPS, maximize your healing, maximize your damage taking ability, tanking ability, those types of things. That there are certain skills and abilities that you need to use in certain orders. And there are lots of games that have certain mechanics. So
and loadouts too, probably. There's probably certain equipment loadouts that maximize all those things.
And there are a lot of games nowadays where you can do that, where you can do the research and, you can Google, Neverwinter Nights was a game.
Oh yeah, I love Neverwinter.
Yeah, I liked playing that.
I can't play it now, but it's one of those that the clunky factor is way too much now.
Yeah, but it was a game. I remember seeing tons of mods that came out for it.
It was one of the first that had it had its own like adventure system. You could make your own adventures,
right?
And it was built into the game.
Yes, and it was awesome. But I remember doing that there, and like there, if you could add Blue Million mods to it and all this additional gear and all these additional new skills and spells, and like people would add all this content that would come from extra books that you could get for D&D and all of that. And I remember like sitting there and just poring over everything and looking at, okay, well, if I cast this before I cast this, then I get this as a bonus to this one. And then, and like lining it up.
Trying to figure out if this perk actually was multiplicative with this other perk. And
and all of that. And I love that, especially when you can figure stuff out and you find, okay, and this is where your spreadsheets come in, right? Or my spread, because I love spreadsheets too. But you figure out, okay, I can get 5% more DPS if I do it in this order or use this, and like that's a big win. And you're like, hey,
this is one of the reasons I like. This is one of the reasons I like the Incursion roguelike so much, because it's based on 3.5 D&D, and it's done very, very faithfully to it, to the point to where one of my favorite builds was, I would build a druid ranger, okay, and I would only take enough levels of druid to get the mount, okay, and then I stayed ranger, and it was usually a drow druid ranger, and here the exploit was you would get on this mount. And you get a flying mount, so you wouldn't drop in pits, and you could fly over lava and shit like that. But you'd get on this flying mount, and then since you have a druid, you could cast whatever that spell is that makes the fog come, so nothing can see. And then as a druid, one of the powers that you get is the ability to see through that shit and pass without trace, so people couldn't follow you. And you're a ranger, so you're a fucking master at a bow. So you're in the middle of this fucking fog bank where nothing can see you, but you can see everything, and you could just plink the shit out of everything. It's stuff like that. That's what you're talking about. You find this sequence of things that you can do that makes you this unkillable fucking killing machine.
Yep.
And yes, it's an exploit, but it's I don't know. It's finding those that's the fun part. And I think one of the things that I find is a downside today is that in almost all of these modern RPGs, there is no procedural generation, and so everything is static, and people have figured out what the absolute most optimal anything that you want to do is. So all you have to do, in fact, you almost can't avoid it. When you start looking through and you start searching for, okay, well, what's the best build for this or that or the other? Bam, you get most optimal, kills everything. Here you go.
Well,
and then you have to exercise self-control to go, well, I don't want to do that. I want to figure it out myself. But then the whole time you're trying to figure it out yourself, you're going, is this optimal? Like, you know what I'm saying? And you get in this trap.
So, and I think that's a great point. It's actually something I wanted to mention, and I had forgotten about it. When we're talking about old school games, you mentioned the manuals, and we talked about, the fold out maps. And then of course there were, you could go into the bookstore and you could buy the guide to whatever, for most games and stuff like that. But there wasn't a wiki for everything.
Right.
And look, I don't want to sound like I'm the, old man yelling at clouds or get off my lawn or any of that. But it's really, really hard to avoid spoilers like that now. Like back when we were playing those games back in the 90s and early 2000s, I mean, first of all, like I didn't have access to the internet, much less there were no wikis for games out yet, but until like what, 93, 94 or something like that. So, when we were playing some of those first games, your only option was,
buy the strategy guide.
Exactly. And I know that there were times I was sitting on the Borders floor, like flipping through a guide because I didn't want to buy it or didn't have the money to buy it, but I still had to figure something out, know. But yeah,
and gaming magazines used to have that kind of shit in it too. Yeah,
right. But I mean, I remember like conversations. I remember you and I, like we were talking about Might and Magic earlier, and I remember you and I, because we've worked together at several different places, we would go to work and we would be talking about, hey, I did this last night. Did you know you could do this? And you'd be like, no, but you could do that, and we would be like sharing, and it was like, I can't wait to get home and go try what Brian told me, that kind of stuff. That was so much fun. And, you really don't get that as much anymore. It's all, it's on a wiki, and great. I mean, that's amazing technology, and I have used them so much for so many games. And for really complex games, sometimes you need some of that information because it's so hard to suss it all out on your own.
Right.
I even think that a lot of games depend on that.
Yep.
That
they make it so difficult so that, and this is one of the things I do like about modern games is a lot of them now have multiple difficulty levels that you can choose.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to where for a lot of these modern games, I don't want to do this super optimized shit. I want to actually kind of, I've gotten to the point where I want to kind of figure it out myself.
Yeah.
And so I will set the difficulty down to fairly low until I get to a point to where I feel like, okay, I'm just steamrolling everything. And then I'll start picking it up a little bit, but I won't do it like I used to do it where, I would set it to even normal or sometimes even hard, because the games are already set up to where, that is at that level, they expect you to know the systems. There's not a whole lot of room for error. And you kind of have to, as a new player, go, oh, let me find the super optimal combination. Right. I don't want to do that. I mean, that's like playing it on rails, there's no creativity there,
right.
So
what would you say? I mean, just being frank, with the way things are today with work and family and all that kind of stuff, I don't get to play nearly as much as I used to, right? So, and I mentioned that there are other genres that I enjoy, and so I will be honest, like I haven't played a lot of role-playing games lately. I want to, but I think probably the last thing that I played that I actually played through was Pillars of Eternity, 1 and 2. And I know there's a lot of other great games out there. You had mentioned, I know you played Baldur's Gate 3, but I know there's others that are out there that are current games that you've probably played that I haven't. What have you played recently? And maybe not even brand new, but just, in the last couple of years, what have you played that you think is really good, faithful games to like that old school mentality?
I think if you haven't played any of the Owlcat games, they're all good. All the Kingmaker games, all the Pathfinder games.
Okay, I have played one of those.
Okay, so the second one's good too. So is the it's Warhammer, so it's a different genre, but the Warhammer Rogue Trader game is another Owlcat game, and it's good, and it's that same kind of aesthetic. Though, man, Warhammer 40K is if you're not already a fan, it was kind of hard for me to get into. It's kind of a steampunk kind of aesthetic, and I'm really not that much into that. But no, those are good. Honestly, dude, I play more roguelikes now. Like I just really, I mean, let me look at my list here, but I really don't have a lot of, like, I just told you I just replayed Wizardry 8 again. Like I loaded up mods in it and replayed the game, and it still holds up. It's still a great game.
Let me just say too,
Diablo 4 is good. If you have not played Diablo 4,
I haven't played Diablo.
You can play it completely solo. That's what I've done. And it's a blast solo. I mean, it's dude, it's so well done. Like the graphics on it are seriously some of the CGI is some of the best I've ever seen in in movies. I haven't seen CGI this good in a lot of movies. Like it's fantastic. The cutscenes are so good. Like it's just like I normally skip cutscenes. I watch the cutscenes with bated breath. They're so well done.
Okay. Awesome.
Let's see. If you haven't played, have you played Divinity Original Sin 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I beat it.
Okay.
That was really good. Now I will say, and to your point a minute ago, playing both of those, the Divinity Original Sin when they put the enhanced edition out, and then 2, those are 2 games that when you start playing them on normal mode, they are hard.
Yep.
At least they were for me. Maybe they aren't for everybody.
No, yeah, you need to if you don't go and do a lot of reading and trying to figure out, one game that is not, it's not your traditional RPG. It is an RPG though. You just have to think of the mechs as characters, and that's BattleTech. And I got to tell you, man, that is one of the best games I've ever played. I have probably 1,200 hours in BattleTech.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked about that. But that was the one where you had certain mods that you keep playing.
Only one mod. That mod is it's RogueTech.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a roguelike.
Well, no, it's not really like a roguelike. It's called RogueTech, but it's not really like a roguelike. What it is basically BattleTech, the core game, and I think you should play through the core story once because the core.
And I have. I haven't finished it.
Okay.
Like I played for a while, and
I didn't finish it either. I got to the point. I got to the point where I got. There's a point in there where you get if you're good, you can capture a mech which has a Gauss cannon.
Okay.
And I got it, and I loved the fucking Gauss cannon. And then I found out that's the only one in the game.
Got it.
And I was like, "Fuck this! I'm not playing it anymore." RogueTech fixes that. RogueTech basically, you pick the time period in BattleTech you want to play in, and then you pick how faithful you want it to be to the time period, right? And then you get there's clan shit, there's proto-mech shit, there's everything from every fucking BattleTech source book you have ever heard of in the game. You can go to every single planet in the inner sphere and the wider, clan space.
Yeah.
Dude, it is you can't run out of shit to do. It is so much fun. Like building the mechs is the most satisfying fucking thing because it's just like you're talking about. You got these trade-offs. You got to balance things, but getting a new piece of gear and popping it on your mech and taking it out for a stroll again. It every single time it's a fucking blast, man. It never gets old. I cannot give enough praise for it. And it's the mod is so easy now. Like you just download the installer and it installs all the shit for you. Yeah. So like it's a no-brainer, man.
Can you get the mod off as like Steam Workshop? Is that where you?
No. I mean, there might be one on Steam Workshop, but that's not the one I would use. Just look up RogueTech on Google. They have their own website and everything. I mean, it's the thing. It'll download the thing. It'll auto update it. You pick all the options you want. Like it's just so well done. Like cannot say enough good things about it.
I'll definitely have to pull it back up. I think I've probably got something like 100 hours in BattleTech.
Yeah.
MechWarrior is a different game. But I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I was just playing the base game. So it does sound like, I mean, I remember you telling me before, it just opens up a lot more.
It's a whole different experience. Like it's so much. I mean, they've got new quests in there, so new storylines you can go down.
Right.
It's just so much stuff. Yeah, can't recommend it highly enough. It's just so good. I mean, that is probably the best. It's certainly the role playing game I put the most hours in over the last 10 years.
So I guess maybe to wrap up the discussion, when we talk about old school RPGs, CRPGs, and roguelikes, like what are your top 2 or 3 games that you've ever played? Like what do you feel of is the pinnacle of those particular genres for you?
Man, it'd be hard to pick just one or two. I mean, So I would say, the ones I have probably put the most time into are BattleTech, Battle Brothers, which is kind of hard to describe. It's kind of like a mercenary management sim, but it's medieval times, and you're mercenary. Like the art aesthetic is kind of like little weeble wobbles. That's what your little mercenaries are. But it's complicated. It's gritty. It's got good progression. It's permadeath, but it's permadeath of a party. So and you can replace them. You know, you can hire new ones. It's really good. I mean, a lot of these other games are good, but I wouldn't say the best. I would say, probably the rest are probably roguelikes. Probably, I would have to say I don't think I could pick one. I would say Incursion, Tales of Middle Earth, T.O.M.E 2, 2.5, or I think it's 2.5.
Right.
And A.D.O.M.
Okay.
I mean, those games are just fantastic. I mean, the bad things I have to say about them are that, they get boring after a while, but everything does. You know what I'm saying? Like, BattleTech in particular, that's one of the reasons I put it so high up on the pedestal. I got I definitely have over 1,000. I think I have 1,200 hours in it. And when you could put 1,200 hours into a game and you're not bored of it, like, I get bored of it, and then a year later, I'll load it back up. It's just that good.
Yeah, I think for me, sometimes when I'm trying to think about what I think is the best, I get a lot of nostalgia. And it may not have been the best game, but you have a lot of memories of that game, So, like, I remember playing both of the original Baldur's Gate games, and then the Shadows of Am expansion on Baldur's Gate 2, I think it was, the Icewind Dale games, and I loved it. And it was all kind of the same, isometric, 2.5D kind of games.
Yeah, Infinity Engine. Yeah.
Right, and I loved those. But I still think, and we mentioned this one earlier, I think Planescape Torment was probably my favorite of all of those types of games. Just the story and the uniqueness of it, uniqueness of the character you were playing. You basically couldn't die, but you did. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, there was still consequences, but it was just different, and it really gave you a different feel for it. But I've got so much nostalgia. We were talking about the Wizardry games, and especially 7.
Yep.
I mean, Bane of the Cosmic Forge, right? Yep. I mean, that was... And it was so funny because I never played Wizardry 6.
So Wizardry 7 is Crusaders of the Dark Savant.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Bane of the Cosmic Forge is 6.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. And sorry. But I never played 6. And 7 was like a sequel to it. It was like the second half of it. But it didn't matter. It was like, these things have happened, and now you must go on. And it was just a great game. And I feel the same way about... we talked about the Might and Magic games earlier, and I loved those games. Those were probably my favorite. It's so hard to go back and play them now. Like, I own all of them now, but trying to go back and play those games now is just almost painful.
I loaded up 6, 7, and 8 not long ago, and could not get through any of them. In fact, I had better success playing Might and Magic 2 and 3. I was bored less on those than I was 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah. And then I guess as far as newer games, and it's probably not what I would fall into an old school CRPG, but I really liked Dragon Age Inquisition. It was it's definitely a newer game, and it has a lot of the newer, all the things we were just talking about that newer games will give you. But with the expansions that came out with it, and just what I really liked the way it dealt with was two things that really stuck out to me. One was just all of these synergies between the different types of attacks and stuff like that, where, if you, and you see this, you were talking about with the Divinity games, and they do the same kind of synergy kind of stuff.
Right.
You freeze them, and then if you strike them, they could shatter, and all that kind of stuff. But I saw that there probably, I probably saw it in the first Dragon Age first. But, they do that really well. And then the other thing was the stronghold or base building that you have in that game. It's a plot point. I don't want to give anything away, but it's interesting in the way that's handled. It's very, I'll just say that you're not always in the same place.
I mean, come on, man. That game's what, 10 years old now? If this is a spoiler to you, that's your fucking fault.
Well, it's just, I just don't want to, I mean, it's a plot point, but it is really interesting, and that you do have, I mean, there's not a ton of customization of it, but there's some, but I don't know. I felt like the story of that was really good. All of the NPCs and other, the team members that you can bring along with you, all of their, everything that goes behind their backstories and everything like that. I felt like it was really good. Right. So anyway, that's probably the one that I like the most that's newer.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because as you're saying this, I'm thinking of other games that now that I really liked, but they're not the old school RPG style, right? Like, I mean, I was going to say, I loved almost all the Mass Effects, but that's not the same fucking thing. It's there's a lot of games out there that are RPGs, but they don't fit this kind of old school aesthetic that I think we were trying to talk about here. So,
well, and it's obvious that there are a lot of people that like those types of games because they still get put out. Most of the AAA titles that come out are more like the Mass Effects or Dragon Age or things like that. I mean, even you were talking about Fallout. You look at Fallout 4. I mean, it fits into that same category there. But they still, I mean, just like we were talking about, you've got, Pillars of Eternity, you've got Tower of Time, you've got the Divinity games, you've got, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3. How does it fit in? Is it more like,
I mean, it's an old school RPG, but it's using the newest, the 5, I guess 4 or 5, one of the two. I guess, the D&D system. And that's, I mean, just in my opinion, that system has there's no choices to be made. You make your only choice when you create your character, and then you're done. So it's like, once I found out that was the system, it wasn't just that I was waiting on them to finish the game, that it was just early access. It's just, no, that's the fucking system. Once I found that out, I was like, well, why do I want to play this anymore then? Like, this is a JRPG is basically what it is,
Yeah, and the story is important in games like this, and having a great story is great. But I think most people play role-playing games because of almost like that little, it's that adrenaline rush or that little bit of, you get the endorphins that go when you realize you can level up and you can go select things and become, get better at this or get this new skill or spell.
You have choices,
Right. I mean, and then like you said, you get to go try them out, and that's really exciting. And I think that's why these old school style games still exist, is because that's something that's not served in any other place.
Right. Yep. I totally agree. It's the creative part, Yep. All right, cool. Well, I think that's it. I think we got it pretty much covered.
Yep. Now I want to go play a game.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to the F'ing Up the Ineffable podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. If you didn't, well, thanks for sticking around this long anyway. We are available on most major podcast platforms, including Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more. We are currently releasing new episodes every 3 weeks on Thursdays, but hope to increase the frequency of releases in the near future. Please subscribe to us on your favorite platform to be informed when new episodes release. And also, we love feedback. Feel free to find and follow us on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, or Facebook, and let us know what you think. You can also email us at effinguptheineffable@gmail.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.